again, thank you very much to Arcane for letting us borrow Anders. And up next, in the ECON track here, we have with us Adam Jonas from Chaincode. We're very grateful to have him. The topic that he's going to discuss with us is developing the Bitcoin developer pipeline. Basically, you're going to hear what it's like for someone to comb the planet looking for open source contributors and industry job candidates. He's going to cover what they've done to address the demand, what we can learn from other effective training programs, and where the gaps in the employment kind of industry remain in the developer space. So with that said, I want to welcome Adam to the stage. Please, let's give him a hand.
Awesome. I've been watching people on stage with a microphone. It sort of feels like stand-up comedy. I'm not that funny, sorry. So welcome to developing the Bitcoin developer pipeline. My name is Adam Jonas. I work at Chaincode Labs, which is a New York-based firm. We employ people to work on open source. No business model, no product. It's not super scalable, but we have some of the best developers on the planet trying to work on protocol mostly, and we work on Bitcoin and Lightning development. So before I go any further, I'm going to say I and we a lot, but I wouldn't be able to do the work that I do without Caralie, who's right here. And so when I say I and we, it's mostly her. And so you should understand that going forward. So when we think about the importance of why we're here, why we're in El Salvador, and what Bitcoin can mean, I think about my own whys, and the reason I'm actually speaking today is that this gentleman couldn't be here. So this is Bernard Parra. He runs BitNob, which is an exchange in Nigeria, and he obviously codes. He's a very friendly guy, and he couldn't be here because of the cover of his passport says Nigeria on it, so he couldn't get a visa. And I think that's pretty screwed up. I want things to change. I want things to improve. And so, thank you for letting me have the chance to speak, but it's at the expense of Bernard, who actually was ironically supposed to speak about the challenges of Africa. So I work in training programs and education generally because it's high leverage. You can come up with a system, and you can have this one-to-many relationship where one person can affect change for many people. Archimedes said, if you give me a lever and a place to stand, I can move the world. And I really believe that education and training can have that kind of change. And we run into effective training programs throughout our lives. So the first one you might run into is school. And school is sort of, the narrative that's sold is that this is this learning opportunity that you can pursue your interests and you can, get a better direction in life, prepare for the real world. But when you sort of look at actually how the system is set up, there's a lot of things that contradict that. You realistically, like this was started 150, public school at least was started 150 years ago, and the idea was really to occupy the children so that their parents could put in a full day work. And then once you have this captive audience, people sitting in straight lines and raising their hand when they're called on, you can teach them whatever you want. You can teach them compliance. You can teach them how to do repetitive tasks, just like their parents do on the assembly line. And so we should be critical about the systems that are around us that are training us to do certain things. It goes even further. If you think about public school, at least where I'm from, is mandatory. So you have this system where you have to go, and I don't know about you, but I've never really learned a lot when I've been forced to go learn something. And then if you go through the system for 15 or 20 years, well, you get the opportunity to stand at the front of the room, take a vow of poverty, and teach the next generation. And so the system persists. And then there's something like sports. Sports is different because it's fun. People get involved with it because they enjoy it. I see old men playing, football past the point where they probably should be. And but sports really changed when it became professionalized. And now we have this system that where you go through the ranks. You pour in a bunch of enthusiastic youths at the top, and they go through the ranks, and maybe a few get through if they're willing to make those sacrifices, but there's a lot of collateral damage. And for every one player that you see on TV, there's hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of players that didn't make it. So, I sort of think about that pyramid the upside down way. I think about it like a marketing funnel. And so you're going to see more pictures about funnels going forward. But it's really just anything else. You pour in a bunch of raw material at the top, and it filters down, and you figure out what's at the bottom. Okay. So I'll tell you, as someone who's recruiting for Bitcoin and Lightning generally, different kinds of programs, different kinds of contexts, it's rough out there. We are getting killed. And university students have very little interest. Google and Facebook, like, their budgets are so crazy that what they can hire out of school or poach out of other companies, like, it's really hard to compete with. Ethereum and altcoins own the narrative. Like, when you're talking about, like, a web developer who's interested in this stuff, they have better tooling. They have dancing. They have Solidity, which is just Java, like, just garbled JavaScript. Like, it's so much easier to get involved in that way. It's hard to compete. Senior developers that have seen fads come and go, they sort of bucket Bitcoin in with blockchain and AI and ML and a bunch of other acronyms. And so it's really hard to convince them that this is real. And for devs that have been doing this for a while, for devs that have actually been involved with Bitcoin, well, they probably bought a little bit in the beginning. And so your money isn't really good to them. So this all adds up to a pretty grim picture. And it's something that Caralie and myself have been trying to address over the last couple of years. So as I said, I work at Chaincode. Just to be clear, Chaincode is not the answer. Chaincode is not a scalable model. We have been self-funded since 2014. Again, no product, no revenue. We exist to further Bitcoin and Lightning. We mostly have protocol developers and researchers. Caralie and I sort of are the odd ducks where we work on education stuff. But it's just not even repeatable. Like, that kind of circumstance is not something that we should depend on. So, yeah, I mean, I'm thrilled to be there. It's the best job in the world. I feel really lucky, and I'm happy just to be the water boy. Peter gets thirsty in between soft forks. So we have two education programs that we run. The first one that we're a little bit better known for is the residency, and that was started in 2016 by Blue Mat. And John Newberry took that over, and he and I co-ran it in 2019. And the idea of this is you take people who are fringe developers, and you fly them to New York City to our office, and you pay them for 3 months, and we invest a lot of time and resources in them. And on the other end, you have protocol developers. It's this magical formula. Again, really expensive, really high touch, not scalable. So we were thinking about how to do something that was a little bit more inclusive, and then COVID happened. So we scrapped the plans of the residency, and we shifted everything online. And we really wanted to design a program that that took advantage of what online did well. And I think what online does well is you can really dive into good content in the comfort of your own home. And that's like, you'll be able to focus. You don't have to fly anywhere. You don't have to talk to anybody. You can just really dig in. But you're sort of missing, when you have something like that, anyone can do that. Like, this is all open source. It's yours. Like, go do it. But most people learn better when they do it with friends. And the idea of creating social pressure was sort of behind this design. We created a 5-week book club where you would show up, you'd prepare the content, and then you'd have things to discuss. We also created sort of these check-in points. You had a one-on-one weekly with someone else in your group where you could get to know them, and you could prepare discussion questions for your small group discussion of 3 to 4 people at the end of the week. And so, we didn't really know if this was going to work. And we've been at it, for a while now. I'm happy to say we had our first seminar reunion last night, and it's real. Like, people make real online connections and actually care about each other. I've never met most of these people before I flew down here, and people really care. And a lot of them are legit contributors in the space. So if you're interested in this, you can go to learning.chaincode.com. We ran the last one. It was about 60 people. The next one is shaping up to be in the hundreds. So, one, you don't have to do it through us. Do it on your own. Two, if you want to apply and get involved with the one that Chaincode is running, you should. The idea is that we created this so it was scalable, so that it was either the same sort of lift for 5 or 5,000. So hopefully it'll be a great experience as this continues to grow. And if you wanted more details about this, you could have gone to Josie's talk, which was yesterday. And Josie does not work for Chaincode. He was just a participant. And he shilled our bags, which we really appreciate. But the idea is this belongs to the community. Like, it was so great to see someone else talking about a program that we don't really want to be the bottleneck behind. So that's the idea. Take the content, do your own thing, and that'll be a recurring theme as we keep talking. Okay, so we had these seminars going, and the problem, there's sort of two ways to approach this. One, I don't think they're particularly outcome driven. Like, you go through this path, and then on the other side, like, then what do you do? And so we wanted to create something that was a little bit more outcome driven. And I think, as I think about this, there's like the laissez-faire approach of this, and then there's the like hands-on approach. And the laissez-faire approach is Bitcoin's inevitable. Like, it's already legal tender. Like, it's going to happen. The devs are going to find their way here. It's not going so well with that approach. And so I'm biased towards action, and so Summer of Bitcoin was a chance to go into a new market, learn about people who really haven't been in touch with Bitcoin before, and try to get them involved in open source. And so when we actually opened the application, we sent out 5 emails to 5 different universities in India, and we got this response, which was not expected and somewhat terrible when it actually happened, because we just weren't prepared for that. Like, we were prepared for 10 people or something like that. And so we had to run an admissions program in a matter of 15 working days to get 5,000 people down to a manageable number. So we did, you go from the Google form at 4875 down to 500 people took the code challenge. We thought that 120 of those answers were pretty good, so we called them up on video, and then we ended up with 51 students, which is what we eventually went with. And so we had these students, but they knew nothing about Bitcoin. They could code. Like, the technical training in India was incredibly impressive. Like, these kids knew how to code, but they knew nothing about Bitcoin. So we had to give them a philosophical base. And so we went out to the community, we recruited some folks to give them the whys of Bitcoin. Why is this important? Why does this matter? Why should you get involved? What are the opportunities on the other side? And so I think it was also helpful to have 3 Indians give those talks, modeling that you can do this. There's not, there's some pathing there. And so they got this sort of like philosophical injection, and then but they still didn't know how Bitcoin actually worked. So we called up Kalle Rosenbaum, and he wrote from scratch a 5-day course explaining the technical details of Bitcoin. It's the first time he's ever done a workshop like this, and I think it gave everybody like the technical base that they needed. And then we layered on the same content that we just talked about. We just took the seminar, layered it on top. For the Bitcoin folks, they did the seminars over 5 weeks. For the Lightning folks, because it's so complicated, we had to stuff it all up front before they worked on their projects. So they did 5 weeks worth of Lightning material in 5 days. So the idea of Summer of Code, really the inspiration of it came from, Summer of Bitcoin was actually modeled on Google Summer of Code. And Google Summer of Code is this program where you take university students and you match them up with open source projects and you pay them for the summer. So we saw that this had been going on for a decade, and so we tried to simulate something like that for Bitcoin. And the problem is that scaling mentorship is super hard. And so we went out and we talked to a bunch of different projects. We recruited 34 mentors, and if you do the math, you realize that a bunch of mentors had to take on a couple students. I think this was both what made the program and what was also just a huge headache. One, the mentors really didn't know what mentoring was. Like, they didn't really have a lot of experience, and so we didn't really do a great job based on the speed that we had to move to set expectations for what a good mentor was. And then forward-looking, like, how do you scale mentorship? There's just so many, there's not that many devs out there, especially devs that are willing to teach and take the time to mentor the next generation. So this is something that we still have to solve. But the kids had a good time. These are some DMs that were sent to Caralie. I don't share my DMs, but I promise that people said nice things to me too. And they shipped code. Like, they actually, everybody who was in the program actually did some work. They shipped code. It was of varying quality, but we got people involved. So something that was pretty important, I think, from the outset is to, again, make sure this is outcome driven. So Sandipan was our first hire. He got a full-time hire at Galloy. He's still in school, but he will be graduating and starting at Galloy in the spring. And the other thing was, we don't want to be the only people doing this. Like, the idea that everyone has to pass through Chaincode in order to onboard in this ecosystem is a terrible idea. So we made this agreement up front that we would get involved, we would provide some infrastructure, and then we'd leave. And that's, in fact, what happened. So Caralie and I will not be working on this program going forward. It'll be the organizer. He'll build his own team. We helped him get some funding. He has escape velocity, and that's it. We're gone. We're moving on to the next thing. So when we think about the paths that someone can take to become a Bitcoin and Lightning developer, we want to think about scale. We want to think about how we're applying our effort. So we have things that are infinitely scalable. Books, like Jimmy, Andreas, Callie put a ton of work into describing things very articulately. And then we wanted to figure out how we could screen some of those candidates so that we could get to know them a little bit better. And the seminar definitely helped us with that, and Summer of Bitcoin helps us with that. And then maybe once you get through there, you're like at the internship level, or there's a Chaincode residency, there's the Brink Fellowship, like there's the Blockstream internship, things that really aren't scalable, but that provide opportunities for the people that are right on the edge and just need that extra push. And then, there's Grant at the bottom. That's Ulysses S. Grant. That's the joke. And again, we want to think about this from scale. Start at the top, as many people as you can pour into that top of the funnel, and then we'll see what filters down. It's a leaky bucket, though. We are putting a lot of time and resources into this. We do these seminars. We do paid programs like Summer of Bitcoin. We do residencies. We're trying to arrange internships. And we're losing a lot of good people. So we have a lot of work to do to optimize that flow. To keep going with the bucket analogy, there's three buckets how I think about this. There's the open source, which we've been talking about so far. There's the industry bucket, and how do you hire devs for companies. And there's the entrepreneurship bucket. And when it comes to the industry bucket, it is rough hiring right now. Like, there are not a lot of people, and that's a problem. And so that's something that Caralie and I wanted to dive into next. And the reason for that is when it comes to becoming a Lightning developer, like, you got to really take this hero's journey. Like, it is a long path. You got to know how to code. We don't teach people how to code. We don't have time for that. There's lots of places to learn how to code. Go figure out how to code and then come to us. Then you maybe get the basics. You go read a book. You go get excited about it. Maybe you do a seminar. And then that's the Bitcoin side. So you understand a little bit about Bitcoin. Now you want to work on Lightning. You go back to the beginning. You got to go read another book. You got to go get the basics of Lightning. Then you're going to go maybe do another seminar or something like that. And then you're going to go play around with the implementations. And so to think that someone who has a stable job and who has sort of a passing curiosity is going to go through all these steps, it's hard. It's hard to find those people that are willing to do the work. And so companies, they got to build. They got stuff to do. And a lot of them just don't have the time to wait for those devs to go through that path. So what ends up happening is they'll just take, any nerd off the street. Like, they don't need someone who actually has, like, the expertise or really the interest. And that's great when things are good. It shows your investors, your employee count is going up, you're plugging some holes, things are maybe not as on fire. But then when things start to get bad, when the market takes a turn, what happens? And I'd argue what happens is people leave. You dilute your mission. You lose your identity of why we're doing this in the first place. And so trying to find devs and actually create a culture where people care, where people actually want to see this revolution succeed, that's the pool that I'd like to hire from. Ultimately, you're going to be able to find people, when it comes to hiring, when you talk about Google or Facebook, you're going to find people who are willing to pay them more salary, give them better snacks, or things you're not willing to do, like build slides into your office. And eventually, they're just going to go. So beware. When it comes to the industry pipeline, the pathing is much more unclear. So you know how to code. You're probably a professional developer, but how do you go through the steps? And I think we haven't quite figured that out. That's something that we wanted to work on next. And so Summer of Bitcoin was really exhausting. We spent all summer herding cats and working with a program that we didn't really intend to work. The scale was definitely not what we intended to do. But we heard that Bernard and his team were putting together a job training program in Africa for Bitcoin and Lightning developers. So we had some conversations, and then once I convinced Caralie not to quit, we dove into Qala. So Qala is the newest thing we're working on. It's got a killer team: Abubakar, Bernard, Tim, and Carla. And we're starting to see this flywheel start to spin, right? We have Abubakar and Bernard. We met them through the seminars. Tim was actually supposed to be the 9th resident in 2019, but he couldn't get a visa. And Carla is sort of our poster child. She went from not knowing us, no contact in February, to getting hired in Lightning Labs 8 months later. So this is why we do this in the first place. And I think what's exciting about Qala for me is that it's an opportunity to design the curriculum backwards. So if we can find people who are hiring, if we can find people that need bodies and care about the mission and care about finding devs that are going through the steps, we can find the people that they want and train them how they want them trained, and then deliver them at their doorstep free of charge. And so that's what we're looking for. If you're hiring and you want to be involved with this, come talk to us. We will create a bespoke curriculum just for you, because that will help us scale this going forward. And again, this is temporary help. We're not doing this forever. We don't want Chaincode to be involved with every program. We want it to spin up, have success, and then we're going to move on to the next thing. So then there's that third bucket, the entrepreneurship bucket. I don't know a lot about that. It seems like there's some stuff going on. I've seen PlebFi, Jeremy Rubin's thing. I've seen 1031, which is Marty Bentz and Matt Odell's thing. I see Max Webster running around doing HiveMind stuff. It's something that maybe we could tackle in the future, but we haven't to date. So if there's anything in this presentation that you like, recurring theme here, do it yourself. We don't want to be doing this all by ourselves. It's exhausting work. And so please steal these ideas, take them home, make them your own. We're happy to work with you. We will make an offer to work with anybody in this room, but if you want to do it on your own, that's even better. And we're all here because we want to see change. We want to see things improve for the better. And thinking about these training programs is a way to affect change, positive change. For many people, one person can affect change. There's the one-to-N relationship where you can affect change for many people. And so here's the ask. Go home. You find people that are willing to do the work. If you want to work with us, we'd be happy to bring an admissions process, a curriculum, and our expertise. And together, I promise you, we can change lives and improve Bitcoin. Just because this is a decentralized movement doesn't mean that we have to be disorganized. We can have these small cells doing this kind of work that either help each other out or don't communicate at all, but we don't have to be just waiting for things to land in our lap. And so we hope that you'll join us. We look forward to working with you, and thank you for coming.
Thank you, Adam, so much. Adam, if I could ask you just to stay for just 1 minute, because I think that was a fantastic presentation about the state of the pipeline of developers, right? So I want to take a couple of minutes to just give anyone the opportunity to ask any questions. Are there any questions from the audience that you might want to ask Adam? Anybody? We got one over here. I'll be right there.
Hi, great presentation. I really appreciate it. Speaking as a developer who has been looking to learn Bitcoin, I'm coming from the web development space, and just finding content about Bitcoin, I found it difficult because my typical sources for finding content to learn for development is like Udemy, and I went there and there were no Bitcoin courses on Udemy, and it was kind of difficult. So I'm really happy to see something like this. And there are developers there. I'm from the Caribbean, and I see Google, the big companies, like sweeping up people from the Caribbean remotely and getting really good developers working. But the problem is that a lot of the developers who I know, they don't know about opportunities like this. And people, especially in North America, we're in the same time zone. We speak English as our first language, and we have a lot of good people there, but we don't know about the people who are doing the work, and the people don't know about us, right? So if we can, I know this online school called Lambda School. How they work, they train you, and then at the end of the course, they said, okay, once you get a job, then you can pay back for school from the salary. So if we can perhaps find an approach like that, where we promise developers that they'll get jobs, at the end, they'll invest the time, they'll spend the time to learn Bitcoin and learn all the complex things that you find, because there are people who are smart and they have the ability, but they don't know the path to get where they want to go, all right? And so if we have something like that where we can promise them at the end of learning this, there are possibilities for a job. In Jamaica and Trinidad and so on, the salaries that we get in the Caribbean is like 1/10 of what you could get working as a developer, right? And if we get these very talented people on a kind of pathway where we can train them and then present them the opportunity to say, hey, we can almost guarantee that you'll get a job and you don't have to pay. We'll take a cut from your salary. That if you take a 50% cut from their salary, that's still way more than they would have earned in living in certain countries, right? So I think that's an approach that we could look into getting developers and find people who are there. There are a number of Caribbean people here in this conference who have connections with the developer community here, there, and I'm sure other South America, India, and so on. We have people in these places. So if we can get these people to reach out to the developers in that space, because right now all I'm hearing is Web3, and the real Web3 is in Lightning and Bitcoin, right? And if we can change that narrative a bit, and saying, we have real exciting stuff happening here, and we have opportunities for true employment, I think we'll find the developers that we're looking for.
Thank you very much for that comment. Adam, you want to comment on anything of what he just mentioned? If not, we could, if there's someone else has a comment or question.
Let's do it.
Excellent. I think we have time for maybe one more question. Anybody have a last question you would like to ask Adam? Sir?
Adam, thank you very much. Absorbing, trying to understand one part of what you were saying, and whether the part that I would question about relates to, like, a small business wanting to do something. In my case, for example, would I come to you or and say, look, here's someone that I found that's terrific talent. I think she's really smart or he's really terrific. Can you do something with this person? Can you transform them into a participant in my enterprise development? And I'll pay them do I pay you or what's the part of, what's the little idea there? Thank you.
Yeah, so just to be clear, so we, actually Square Crypto paid all the students to participate in Summer of Bitcoin. So there's funding. When it comes to Qala, we are going to find funding to pay those students to go through that training program. When it comes to the seminar, it's a little bit different. Like, that's meant to be a part-time program, so that's free. And you can either do that within your own company and have your own little book club, or you can do it through Chaincode. It's up to you. In terms of you identifying good people and saying they need X, Y, Z, yeah, I mean, I don't know how much that scales, but we're at a point where I think you can still email me and be like, I need help with this one person, and I can help you. Maybe not forever, hopefully not forever, but there's not a lot of people on the board. Like, it's the same people that we're still talking to, trying to get through the pipeline. So, yeah, if you know people that are willing to do the work, bring them. You don't need lots of people. One. That's one. There's 100 people in this room. That's 100. That's 100 people. Like, that'd be great.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Adam. Everyone give Adam a hand.